How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Down to Earth with me, Kristian Harloff. Thanks for joining me here today on the channel. Really appreciate it. As always, if you're brand new to the channel, hit subscribe. Why? Well, we're trying to get to 50,000 because we want more people talking about this. Any channel that you can find that is talking about this and getting the word out, because mainstream media ain't doing it. So hopefully you guys will go and do that. Check us out, comment, like, yada, yada, yada. Okay, one of the things that we've covered many times on this channel, and we've been talking about it, is the idea of the catastrophic disclosure, controlled disclosure. Will it happen? The bills that are potentially going to be passed or at least suggested, the Schumer-Rounds bill that was essentially gutted at the end of last year, and now Robert Garcia put in a few amendments to it to try to get it passed. Most people think that it's just going to get gutted again. It won't happen. But there is this plan. We had talked to Steve Bassett on our show on the big thing, which is, by the way, moving to this channel next Tuesday. But this is something that he said, that there is this idea that there will be controlled disclosure coming from the government and presented. And that's ultimately what Schumer has been wanting to do. Even before David Grush came to play, there was this idea of how they would get this information out to the public, and it was this kind of slow drip. Well, Danny Sheehan, if you don't know who Danny Sheehan is, he's currently the attorney for Lou Elizondo, and he's a very prestigious attorney. He's been involved in a lot of different things, whether Watergate, other things too. We actually had him on the show not too long ago as well. But he was giving a speech, and this is what he said exactly about controlled disclosure. Take a listen.
Controlled disclosure. What they're doing is they're proposing through the United States Senate, they're proposing setting up a UFO controlled disclosure campaign. And it would be proposed to the president by a 9-person panel. The UAP or UFO controlled disclosure campaign board. It's an oversight, a records review panel that they're talking about establishing, but that they're recommending that this group be extraordinarily heavily weighted by people that are inside the military and inside the intelligence community and inside the executive branch that have been already concealing it for all this time. So that they're proposing that this be a mere recommendation made to the president, and that the president would decide, ultimately who's going to be on such a panel, and the president is going to ultimately decide how much of this information is going to be publicly revealed. And so that what you'll see is that the president's schematic that they're proposing is yielding up on the part of the United States Congress the authority to the president and to the executive branch to decide voluntarily again how much information they're planning to let the public know about in this case.
Okay, so when you hear that, you go, all right, good in theory. Because I think that if I'm following this for the first time, I go, wow, that's interesting. I wonder if that's going to come to play. That's okay, what a plan that is, that they're going to go to the president, this group of people, they're going to do this, and they're going to present it, and whatever information they think that the public should have, that's how it's going to work. But after covering this for about a year, I feel like I've heard this a bunch of different times, and I have to say, what's different about this time? When I hear it said again, it's like, yeah, of course, it'd be great if whoever the president is next year, they say, okay, listen, here's our plan. But you got to go through all these jumps and hoops and whatnot, and you got to do all this stuff in order to even get that done. And I think a lot of the stuff that I just mentioned earlier with the Robert Garcia amendment, a lot of that stuff has to pass. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen in that Schumer and Rounds bill that you say, yeah, well, all of this is happening now, and we're going to be able to push this forward, and we're in control now. After 80 years of not being in control, we're finally in control. Where's the shift coming there? I mean, even if you look at the stuff that we talked about on this morning's show with about David Grush making his statement about the stuff that Gillibrand was talking about with Arrow, who knows what side she's on now, and who knows how controlled Arrow is going to be over this, and who knows if whoever the president might be says, listen, I'm going to listen to DOD and Arrow, and thanks, but I don't really want to go with this proposed plan that you guys have. So no, thank you. I'm going to just do what DOD and Arrow tells me to do. So I'm skeptical of it. Now, the idea of it, of course, it's fantastic. If it's like, okay, this is these are the people that are on this committee, and it's not the people from Arrow, and it's select people that we believe are not going to be trying to hold the information. They're people who actually want to get the information out to the public about whatever the hell is going on up there, and information that we might have. And maybe it comes after a hearing. I don't know. Maybe it comes after a hearing. Maybe that's where it starts to become more real, because whatever happens at this hearing, if you listen to whether it's Tim Burchett or whoever it might be, that if it is some of these whistleblowers that David Grush, the witnesses that he spoke to, that prompted him in the first place to come forward, if those people actually get in front of Congress with stuff that just blows your mind and you go, well, there's no turning back now. And we covered a clip on the show this morning where we talked about, I didn't realize at the time when I covered it, it was an older clip from David Grush, Fravor and Graves. And Fravor was on Graves' podcast. And at the time, I think it was from late 2023, and they talked about how there was a documentary coming out that was part of that was a game changer. And that documentary hasn't come out yet. And I was assuming it's the James Fox one, even more now because there were so many delays on that documentary. And I think it's also the thing that is, I think Lou Elizondo is involved in it. I'm not sure, but apparently there's supposed to be information in there that just changes it all, changes the perspective. Let's say hypothetically that is indeed the case, and something comes out there, information comes out there, and then information comes out in the hearing. If it actually does change the way that the majority of the public sees it, and I know that you guys have heard me say it many times over, and some of you don't disagree, some of you don't agree with me, but I'm pretty adamant with it that it is great that we can have channels like this one, and then there are other amazing channels out there that are giving this information daily, and like I said in the beginning of this video, because the mainstream media isn't covering it, and I don't want to hear about, well, yeah, the NBC did a web piece about it, and the internet is great to get news from. I know, and people are like, well, that's how you normally get my news. Most people get it from the internet or Twitter. Yeah, but you have to understand that the mainstream media with news, whatever, I don't care if their ratings are, if there's 50 people watching either one of these things. It's a matter of image. It's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of PR. For some reason, the validity will come if people are like, oh, well, I was tuning back and forth, and I turned on Channel 4 News, and it's all anybody was talking about were these new hearings and this, and it was everywhere, and not just on the internet. That's when things change. It just is, because it looks like, oh, this isn't just some kind of niche internet thing, which I know it isn't, but it certainly seems that way to some people. And if it becomes a mainstream thing, then the disclosure conversation really will accelerate. And I think that's one of the reasons that there's a stronghold on the mainstream media and what they cover, and why they don't cover this at all. And as I mentioned, when it comes to the idea of, I don't care if you think everybody inside of it is a crackpot, when you have the Senate Majority Leader trying to pass bills about UFO disclosure, you should be covering it. To just say, oh, this is a bill that they're considering doing. This is a former Rear Admiral, Tim Gallaudet, who is out there saying this and this, and they did that on the NBC website. Do it on the show, because that's when this thing that Danny Sheehan is talking about, to me, that's when it becomes more realistic. Because like, oh, wait, you can't turn away from it now, because the public is talking about this. Everywhere you go now, the public is actually talking about it. We talk about it here. And that's why I always tell people, when you're growing all of these channels, when you're starting all this conversation, eventually it's going to be too big for them to stop us from talking about it, because everybody's going to be talking about it. And there'll be more channels. I say this all the time. You should start a channel. You should start a channel. You should talk to your families about it. You should talk to your friends about it. Let them laugh. Let them go, bring it. And don't start saying right away. You say whatever the hell you want. But for me, I'm not talking, but when people say, they'll goof when I bring it up. Like, oh, you do a UFO thing, aliens, huh? I'm like, it's not about that for me. It's about there's clearly some information and programs and other things that are being kept from the public, the world. What is it? Is it information that technology that could help the planet? Is it stuff that could help us? What is the disclosure? I'd like to know. And I feel like you do too. That's why you're watching this. So what do you think about Sheehan's comments overall? Did you like what he said? Do you think maybe, are you more optimistic? Do you think this is actually a plan because they're talking about it so much? Or do you just think this is one of those things where it's like, no, it's hopeful, they're crossing their fingers and they want this to happen, but the likelihood is slim to none? Put your comments in there. Tell me what you think. Very curious. And once again, thank you for joining me here on the channel. As always, please subscribe to it. Leave a comment. We are on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. If you found me from UAP Tuesdays, which is usually on my main channel, we did our last UAP Tuesday on that channel. UAP Tuesday will live here every Tuesday morning. It will be about an hour-long show recapping the news of the week, certain things that we've covered here, certain things we haven't, but I'll have guests on. I'll do interviews from people inside of the community on this channel. It'll all be found here. So if you haven't already, hit that button. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate you, and we'll see you tomorrow.